What, if any, changes would you like to see made to the education system in Idaho?
Yeah, first, I think that the relationship with the federal Department of Education, um, I would love to see the Idaho Department of Education find a practical path to sever the relationship with the federal Department of Education. Um, in the 10th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution is where it really articulates that the federal government's authority should be limited, and to that which is not given to the federal government in the Constitution is given to the states. And so uh, education is not in the U.S. Constitution. So it's our duty, it's our baby, it's our responsibility. The Idaho Constitution very explicitly talks about that Idaho, the state of Idaho, will provide a public common school free. And so it is our responsibility. It's not the federal Department of Education. It's not the federal government's responsibility. It's the citizens of Idaho's responsibility. So that doesn't necessarily put a whole lot of actual teeth into how do you do that, which is why I would say we need to find a practical path to do that. For a long time, the state of Idaho has been dependent upon federal funds in order to do a lot of our education, and it would be pretty devastating to just pull the plug. But listen, if we don't chart a practical path to sever the relationship, then we'll be sitting around in 10 years thinking, well, maybe we should no longer be held captive and enslaved to the federal Department of Education. Shouldn't someone have done this years ago? And so I think that would be the primary thing that I would say our education needs to take a serious look. Idaho people know how to educate their children, and we don't need the federal government to interfere with that. Uh, yeah, it does mean that we're going to have to find a way to put some more money toward that locally. But one example that I can think of, a place where we don't need federal money to do, and uh, I'm sure everyone who's watching right now in Idaho knows. Maybe this is across the whole of the United States, but children, not every child is starving in the city of Twin Falls or in the state of Idaho. And when the federal government comes along saying, hey, we're going to provide free breakfast and free lunch for every child, that sounds great to us. But you know what? We need to be disciplined to say thank you, federal Department of Education or federal government, but we don't need your fingers in everything that we do. And I make the argument that a local community can better, more compassionately care for those who are poor and those who are in need of help with food than the federal government, who doesn't know anything about us.
I'm doing my best to make sure I go to that other view. There's a reason that I'm showing just Paul on the answers. I'm trying to be as impartial as I possibly can and not show my excitement as it would be, or lack thereof, to the question. So, and the same thing, I've got some folks that you'll want to go back in, Paul, and read all of the comments that are on here. I'm intentionally not reading comments that are in support of or against what you're saying. So as those comments are coming in, I'm just explaining that to the viewers that are out there. But there are some comments coming in and some information that you might just like to see how those people are responding when
Yeah.
this show is over with. So um, Brendan Bleeker popped in and said, I came in late. Should we open the schools?
Yeah. Yeah, so my knee jerk reaction is absolutely. Why not? Um, again, I want to give the benefit of the doubt, at least from this vantage point, to those who are in this position of trying to make decisions. I want to believe that they're trying to act in the best interest of the citizens. But listen, I'll be really frank here that I don't see the urgency that we're seeing being pushed through health districts. That this so we're in the middle of what's identified as a pandemic, and listen. I completely agree. This is a real virus. This is a real deal. I'm not making light of the severity or the seriousness of this. I mean, I've witnessed people suffering with COVID-19. So I know firsthand it's a real issue, and I know firsthand death does come as a result of this. And so, from everything else that we see or that we say out of this, if we are calling this a pandemic, as the experts, the quote unquote experts, are saying that it is, I just don't see. I don't see the severity of that that's trying to be pushed upon us. Now, again, it doesn't mean that people aren't hospitalized and that there's real people who are really sick. But we don't see bodies laying in the streets. We've been watching and reading. Go and read primary documents. And the spread of this disease just does not come through the children like it does with adults. And the severity of it, that initially we were told is for the extreme older population. We're seeing even they are recovering from it quite a bit quicker and stronger than many initially thought that they would. And so, my position would be that, yes, we need to open up the schools, and we don't need to be living in fear. The worst thing that can happen to any people is to live in fear of unknown. And I just don't think we need to be living in that kind of fear. We're better people than this. We're stronger people than this.
I want to remind everybody that's watching really fast. I know we have people that are kind of coming in late and such. If you're not watching this on the Shane Talks Politics page, if you're asking questions, I'm not seeing them, and I want to get to any questions that are coming in. That's also a reminder for anybody who is watching that this is a virtual town hall. This is here for you to ask questions, so just ask them down in the comments section. So long as you're on my page, either on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter, I should see those questions coming in, and I will be sure to ask. I do have some personal questions that I set aside just to kind of keep things moving in between, but really I would prefer all of these coming from you because, hey, he's your candidate, and you need to know where he stands, and I'm sure you have several questions that you need to ask. So please feel free to ask those. This is your time. Looking at some of the other questions I've got up here, we are getting more and more people from the Democratic Party that are finding their way into offices throughout the state. You're going to be working with those people that have very possibly have opposing views, as well as knowing some of your views. I would assume you're going to run into the same challenge even with some of the establishment Republicans in our state, I'm sorry to say. How are you equipped to handle with those differing viewpoints, and what do you think you can do to kind of help reach across the aisle and move things forward in the state of Idaho?
Yeah, I think that it has to be known that anyone who's going to go to the State House, that they're going to have to work with people who think differently than they do, who believe differently than they do. And really, when you stop and read the historic rationale behind the establishment of a constitutional republic, it's actually the legislators would actually understand that it actually benefits us to hear and to think and to argue and debate issues because we come to better conclusions because we're thinking things like because I do believe a certain way, I'll have a tendency to express myself in the confines of that without the benefit of someone who thinks differently or would oppose this thought. And maybe I haven't thought of it like that. And how would I consider this? And so the thing that perhaps is the most unfortunate thing that's happened inside of our government is that we've lost the ability to disagree with each other. We've lost the ability to civilly debate and have conversation. And I think at the end of the day, we're better off whenever we sit down or we stand on the floor of the House and we argue from different vantage points and we come to a better conclusion. So I think that I would be capable of doing that. Listen, I've lived with people all my life who think like me and think differently than me. Even here in the city of Twin Falls, on a pretty regular basis, I sit down with religious leaders of lots of different faiths, lots of different religions, and we have some pretty heated and straightforward and frank conversations. But we also, at the end of the day, know that we're neighbors, and I don't have to watch my back; they don't have to watch their back, and I don't have to change what I believe. And so I think at the end of the day, I have a better understanding why they think or why they believe like they do, and they would have a better understanding from that vantage point from me as well. So I think it's a good question. I appreciate that question, Shane.
This will be a fun one. There are going to be people, because you are a pastor of a church, that are going to have concerns over that separation, obviously, of church and state. And
Yeah.
what would you say to them to make them feel more comfortable with how you will handle that in your political life?
Yeah. And I really do appreciate that question. And I want to think about two things in relationship to that good question. That first of all, I would address and take us to the Idaho Constitution. The preamble of the Idaho Constitution states this: "We, the people of the state of Idaho, grateful to Almighty God for our freedom." And then it goes on and articulates, much like what the U.S. Constitution does, the liberties that we have. And so the Idaho Constitution actually acknowledges and makes it very clear that we as a people are grateful to Almighty God. So I start from there to say that it's actually not out of place for people of faith to be engaged in the government, especially when the government that we live in acknowledges the Almighty God and that we're grateful to him. And then I think I would also say inside of this is that I'm not running to be the pastor of the state of Idaho. And I'm grateful that there is no such office. I'm running to be a representative of my neighbors. I'm running to be a representative of District 24.
Glenada popped up with, "On the Declaration of Independence, our founders vowed their lives, fortunes, and sacred honor. What do you believe that meant to them, and what does that mean to you?"
Mm. Yeah, it means they knew what they were up against, and they laid everything on the line. They knew if this didn't work out, that this would be treason against the king, and so they laid it all on the line, and they knew what they were doing, and they knew that the cost that would be included in it if it didn't work out. And so I would say, before I say what does that mean to me, I would say about them, and I would say about that declaration and about those movements of bless the living God, that they were sold out to do this, and they were willing to go that far to secure a nation, to secure a people that could live in this kind of liberty. And I would say that they set a great example. They set a bold example of how the people that would come after them should live. And I would certainly want to desire to lay it all on the line for the state of Idaho. I'd want to lay it all on the line to preserve what we have had and what I believe is not something we want to give up, the United States of America, and that it would too be something that I'd be willing to lay it all on the line.
What is your philosophy on dealing with special interest groups and or lobbyists?
Yeah. So listen, I've actually had interaction and exchanges with lobbyists and special interest groups, and all of it from the opposing of them. Listen, a representative represents the people. It represents the people that elected him. And the special interest groups and the lobbyists, they try to buy the representative. And so I do see that there is some benefit that lobbyists do give us They do research. They come to the table with background on particular issues, but the legislator can never forget that he is the representative and not the lobbyist. And we can have a love-hate relationship, I think, with lobbyists, but I think if we don't understand their proper role, then I think we get what we have today, and that's a special interest driven legislature, a lobbyist controlling legislature. And we end up with people who are afraid to adhere to the Constitution because they're afraid the lobbyist will drop them. They're afraid the lobbyist will put their support somewhere else. And so I think a legislator has to know with wisdom the relationship that he has with lobbyists or special interest groups. Really, he's got to have his eyes wide open for what's happening.
What are your views regarding the role of the media in covering Idaho's political landscape?
Hey, don't you love the First Amendment, man? Yeah, the freedom of the press. What we've seen have happened as of late with some censorship against newspapers, censorship against individuals, even or even small market press. Listen, the government really should have no regulation over the press. And it's complicated because you want the press to report the truth. But I tell you, I think the people know when they're reading reports that they're reading something that's biased, leading, or misleading. And they know the difference between true reporting and fake reporting. And we don't need the government, nor do we need special interest groups to make that decision for us. We need a free press. And if we don't have a free press, we are in greater danger than any of us know.
This one comes from Brendan Bleeker. What are your thoughts about Ammon Bundy?